welcome. This is a public meeting as required by the Planning Act to afford any person an opportunity to make representation with respect to a proposed minor variance respecting 205 McClary Avenue in the municipality of Central Elgin. Does any member of the committee have a disclosure of interest concerning this proposal? Seeing none. Ms. Leach, what method of notice and when was the notice given to the public for this meeting, please?
Mr. Chair, as per requirements of the Planning Act, notice was mailed by regular post to every owner of land within 60 meters of the subject land and applicable agencies on March 14th, 2023. Notice was physically posted to the property by municipal staff, and notice was also posted to the municipal website.
Thank you. Is the applicant or agent here, and do they wish to come forward to the podium and explain the application, please? Are you speaking, Mr. McClure? Oh,
the applicant,
forward, sir. Mr. Sharifi, if you could just come to the podium and press the button for the microphone so that people at home, as well as those that are in the chamber, can hear. Thank you, sir.
My name is Frank Sharifi. I'm representing my wife, Fatima Sharifi, the registered owner of the property. Around 15 years ago, we purchased this vacant land property known as 205 McClary Avenue, which is a residential neighborhood on the east side of McClary Avenue. It is our desire to build a new retirement home that is appropriate for the area and will not alter the character of the neighborhood. We believe the variances requested are minor and are in keeping with the policies and intent of the official plan and the zoning bylaws. Also, I did read the planning report and I'm in agreement with nothing more to add. The proposed variances reflect the more recent R1 zoning regulations related to yards, lot depth, and coverage being applied to new housing developments for standing. So that's all I have to say for that, and I'm here to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Sharifi. Questions from council, please. Thank you. Ms. Leach, have you received any written submissions on the proposal?
Mr. Chair, correspondence has been received from George and Carol Meyer, Ron Cowdis, and the Kettle Creek Conservation Authority. Concerns include the number of variances being requested, privacy, shadow casting, the impact of decks, patios, and fences, the width of McClary Avenue, loss of public green space, and setback from the lake. Kettle Creek Conservation Authority has indicated in a letter dated March 22nd, 2024, that Kettle Creek Conservation Authority staff have no objection to the minor variance as long as the established 21-meter erosion hazard limit as defined by the technical assessment is maintained, and that a subsequent permit will be required from Kettle Creek Conservation Authority prior to any development or alteration activities upon the property.
Thank you, Ms. Leach. Do we have anyone online? Oh, excuse me. Councillor Graham.
Through you, Mr. Chair. I'm just wondering if Mr. McClure is going to speak to this a little bit.
Thank you. Mr. McClure, did you wish to speak before the open session?
I have nothing further to the report that was prepared. If council or the committee have any questions on the report, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Councillor Graham?
Maybe if you could just run us through it a little bit, Mr. McClure, would that be okay?
Sure. So as per the report, it is a legal lot of record. So essentially one of the, I guess, looking at the first page of the report and the recommendations, there is a requested for the variance for the lot depth of 27.43 meters. That's to recognize the existing lot. So ultimately the property itself does not meet the zone as it currently stands. So that's just recognition of what's being proposed, or sorry, what exists on the ground. The second request is the combined lot coverage of 40%. So of note here is that the Port Stanley bylaw currently has a combined coverage or a coverage requirement for the residential or dwelling of being 25%, whereas the accessory buildings and structures would be 8%. So this is an increase on that, but it would include all the buildings and structures. This would include unenclosed decks, porches, other things that wouldn't necessarily be covered through the bylaw. So From staff's position, the requested increase was considered to be minor. As has been stated by Mr. Sharifi through his opening submission, is that the minimum front yard depth of 6 meters is consistent and has been accepted by the committee previously on other applications such as this. This recognizes the fact that 6-meter depth is the depth required to park a vehicle and is on the property itself. Similarly, a northerly side yard of 1.2 meters is consistent with what has been approved in the past in Port Stanley on these newer types of development. The minimum rear yard depth of 6 meters, again, this kind of builds into the lot depth of the 27.43 meters and how the lot is configured. So it seemed reasonable to have that minimum lot yard depth of 6 meters in this instance. And then in order to accommodate the parking on the site, that's why the one condition was provided that 2 off-street parking spaces are provided on the property. And then the condition with respect to the Calgary Conservation Authority, as was prepared or provided, a submission and conditions by Kettle Creek Conservation Authority has been submitted as well. That provides that the specific condition to deal with the setback as part supported by the studies is imposed, which again staff was supportive of, and as was provided again through the opening submission, these are all variances that have been supported in the past and would be kind of consistent again with the understanding that the Port Stanley bylaw dates back to the late 60s. So we're dealing with newer development today within a policy regime of today with a bylaw that is nearing 60 years old.
Thanks, Mr. McClure. Can I ask just a quick question following Councillor Graham? When we have a new lot, a vacant lot, and someone's going to build, you go through various things. Is there an environmental or an eco policy that you look at?
There would be, depending on the nature of where the lot is situated. In this instance, the property has a portion of the lands that abut onto Lake Erie as a hazard. That's where the triggers are provided for the review of the Kettle Creek Conservation Authority and to demonstrate the appropriate studies are undertaken to allow for development on lots of record or new lots. This again is an existing lot of record. The entire area along this part of Port Stanley is covered by the Kettle Creek Conservation Authority's regulated area. So again, through the Kettle Creek Conservation Authority's expertise and their understanding and mandate through the Conservation Authorities Act, we rely on them to provide their technical expertise on matters such as this. And this is based on the studies that were required through KCCA and the municipality's policies to deal with development within proximity to the conservation within the regulated area and within proximity to a hazard. That's where that setback was established and is the basis for staff's condition number 7 in its report and the additional conditions that were submitted to council today through the Kettle Creek Conservation Authority's letter and request.
Thank you. Can you just confirm those? So if there was an environmental request through the planning department for something on a vacant lot, are you saying that it would be through Kettle Creek Conservation Area or through your office?
It would be the nature of the request. So again, there's policies that are triggered through the official plan for the municipality of Central Elgin. So in this instance, there would be a trigger for any development within so many meters of a hazard, which this would be triggered by the policy. So from a land use planning perspective, there would be a policy trigger that would require studies and reports to be done to address the policies of the municipality's official plan, but with the property itself being completely within the Kettle Creek Conservation Authority's regulated area and subject to its own permitting process through the CA Act. They also require specific studies in that in order to approve or allow for KCCA permitting through its own process. So there's two separate processes here. The minor variance would establish the buildable envelope that the applicant would have to go through a process with the Central Elgin in the future to get building permits, lot grading plans, all these other things that would be required through that process. But in addition to that, KCCA's regulation and regulating permits would also be required as applicable law before the building official could issue a building permit.
Thank
So
you.
there's two levels of oversight there.
Thank you. I'm learning a fair amount. Sorry for the on-the-go learning. But lastly, heritage. I hear about Port Stanley, and there's some areas with respect to a heritage policy. This lot doesn't fall under that.
No, it does not.
Thank you. Questions? Councillor Watson, and we are going to get to the proponents in a moment, please.
Okay.
Sir?
Through you, Mayor. Mr. McClure, this is just a learning process for me, but there's like 7 conditions here that have to be met. So does that happen very often in planning like this?
Mr. McClure?
Thank you. It all depends on the nature of the application, and traditionally, in the past, we've had instances where there are, a handful of minor variances, but in this instance, just based on what's being proposed and the nature of what was being proposed, it just happens that there's more than normal.
Thank you. Questions for council before we hear from the proponents? If I could ask you to come forward, please, whoever's speaking, we can do a list, or I see Mr. Cowdes here. Please come forward and just state your name and press the button for the red light. Thank you, sir.
Your worship, I have an exhibit that accompanies a PowerPoint presentation I prepared. Can I present that to?
Please.
Thank you. I'll come back to this exhibit. It's embedded in the presentation, so, but it's complex. My name is Ron Cowdes, as I said, and I'm a landscape architect. I've been practicing in London for 46 years. I've done probably over 5,000 projects, and I'm currently working on over 300. So I have some background in development and have some understanding of what's presented before you. And I happen to live across the street. I'm also speaking on behalf of the immediate neighbors, the Moores, the Smiths, the Pences, and the Myers, who live all around the proposed development. Not advancing, is it? No, I'll have to rely on you. Advance. The provincial policy statement directs the Committee of Adjustment to consider not only the quantitative issues at stake here, and your planner has done a good job of identifying setbacks and the quantitative type issues, but we're also charged and directed by the provincial policy statement to consider qualitative issues, and that's where I'm focusing my attention. The variances that are applied for do have qualitative impacts on the surrounding community. The next slide. Go the other way. The applicant is asking to make a change on all 4 sides of the site. It's not one little setback from one side or the other. All 4 sides of the site require variances. And so we would contend this is not minor at all. When you look at the total impact of all the variances that are applied for, setbacks, the size of the lot, the coverage of the lot, and the setback from the lake, what we have is far beyond what a minor variance would entail. Next slide. So this is what I prepared to help understand some of the issues at force. I've taken an aerial photograph of the site, and you see the lake at the bottom. And I've taken the proponent's illustration and superimposed one on the other, sort of making it a bit transparent, like an overlay. So it's to scale, and the proponent's proposal is sitting on the site. The red box that you see is the proposed location for the house. And I'll get to the blue box and some of the other information in a moment. First of all, the front yard setback. The bylaw, as we've been told, requires 7.62 meters. And what's proposed is 6 meters in order to allow the minimum to get a car off the road. The next slide. But what you have to understand is that McClary is not your normal road. It's a very narrow road. It's not like Kokomo. It's only 15 feet wide. And I've drawn a dotted red line there so you can see approximately where the property line is. In a normal subdivision, you've got 20 feet between the edge of pavement and your property line, and then another 20 feet to park your car. So there's a much larger setback. That doesn't exist here because when these lots were severed many, many years ago, they were anticipating small little cottages, summer homes being built here. They weren't anticipating a 5,000 square foot house on the lot. The middle illustration is a measuring tape at my house, which shows that the setback from the street is 37 feet, not what's requested, which is about 18 and a half.
Sorry, when was your house built?
20 years ago, 22 years ago.
Thanks.
It was built on the site of an existing house. One of the McManus brothers lived there, and they tore down half of the McManus house and put my house on the same footprint. So we basically used the same foundations location. The next slide deals with the side yard setback. The bylaw is 1.8, the requested is 1.2. Again, when this bylaw was put in place, it was a different form of construction, but also it anticipates a house next door. So moving the lot to 1.2 means if something happens adjacent, it's going to be right on top of the house that's built here. The next slide, the lot coverage. Now we'll get to the blue box. If you superimpose the existing bylaw and a 30-meter setback from the water, which is what Kettle Creek Conservation Authority has required, the blue box is what you end up with. So rather than the proposed footprint, you end up with a very small footprint on the site. About 12% coverage rather than 40% on lot 16. The next slide, the lot depth. As you've been told, the lot is only 27.4 meters deep. And there requires a variance from 100 feet. This is not a lot backing on a lot. This is a lot backing on a house, and you'll be shocked when you see where the property corner is. So if a house is built here as close as proposed, it has a significant impact on the adjacent land. The next slide. You see the red arrow pointing to the property boundary? You can see a wooden stake there. Property corner that we're talking 6 meters from is right at the patio door of Mr. Smith's house. It's not a backyard that we're backing onto. It's that patio door. So a fence could be built right there, blocking off all the windows and impacting the enjoyment of Mr. Smith's house. Yes, Michelle.
Councillor Halpin, please.
Thank you. If I may ask, how did it come to be that a house was built so close to that property line? Was that a variance or was that an error at the time that the home was built or? Right, okay. After the fact, and the severing wasn't done in a way that accommodated it? Oh.
Sorry. I think the severances were in anticipation, the little one-story boxes that people have on Maud and all through Orchard Beach. That's what people were building back then. So they weren't anticipating a real big house. And so building a small house, within the bylaws as we know them, wouldn't have been a problem. But now we're talking about squeezing or using current standards to squeeze a house onto a lot where it was never intended to be.
Thank you, Councillor. Excuse me, Mr. Coutis, Deputy Mayor would like to speak.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, that part of that house, it doesn't look that old. How old is that section of that house when it was built right there against that property line? Okay, and hopefully the proposed new house is quite a ways off that point. I'm guessing it's quite a large percentage away from that point as what that house is on the property line.
Whoops, I don't think so. Mr. Coutis, did you want to confirm?
I have an illustration that shows where the proposed house will be in relationship to this location. Historically, this house was built by Hyman, who was the first mayor of London. So it has quite a bit of history, as all the houses in this neighborhood do. This is where a London elite would spend their summers. The next picture, the next illustration, talks about rear yard setback, and this is where the setback that's proposed is the height equal to a two-story house. So how high is a two-story house? So if you're looking at a single floor, maybe 3 meters, 2 floors, 6 meters, and then you've got the roof, so the height would be measured to the midpoint of the roof. So you might be in the order of 8 or so meters high with the house. The next slide gets to the point that I was talking about. So that's what will happen. That's 6 meters from the face of Mr. Smith's house with a two-story house mass there. And of course, you can have patios, you can have decks, you could put a fence up along the property line. All those will have a significant impact on Mr. Smith and the privacy of his home.
Excuse me, Mr. Coutis. Councillor Connors, please.
Yes, through you, Mayor. The 6 meters you're indicating there, is that also where we saw that property stake? And if so, how far is that stake from the existing house right now?
It actually, the stake is under the eaves of the house.
Councillor Halpin.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Mayor. So I do appreciate the consideration about the porches and things, but logistically, as far as the variances go, the variances don't change anything about whether they might, for example, build a fence along that line right by the door of that house, do they?
They don't, no. Yes.
Thank you, Councillor Halpin.
The next slide informs us about the extension of McClary. So what's proposed on the drawing, you can see McClary's extended quite far. And I've highlighted the existing tree that you can see on the plan. Do you see that? So there's an existing maple tree there. So what's proposed is that McClary would be extended quite a way into the existing right-of-way. Next slide. So there's the 5-meter road, and you can see the existing maple tree, and the red band on the right drawing shows about where the new road barrier would be to keep cars from driving into the lake. So that space, which is currently public green space, the community has a fire pit there, and every day, I'd say hundreds, but a lot of people end up there, walk in this location, they walk out to the lake, and they sit there and look at the water, and then turn around and come back. I know about the space because I mow the grass there. But the public use then would be lost. Probably that maple tree would go and the barrier moved forward. The next slide is consistency with the surrounding neighborhood. And as has been mentioned, most of the houses in the neighborhood have been built in the 1914 to 1916 period. Some of the original homes in Orchard Beach, when actually there was a beach and there was an orchard, these houses were built there. The adjacent homes have all respected their neighbors' setback from the lake. and they're arranged in a line. So when you look at the illustration, you can see Alma Villa on the left, my cottage, my home in the middle, and Mr. Smith's cottage on the right. And I've drawn a line right across all of them, showing the setback of the adjacent neighbors. What's proposed projects way forward. And as a result, most of us will be looking into the backyard or the back of the house of what's proposed. I think we maybe missed a slide here. Did we? No, okay. This is a view from the Pence's deck. And there's a slide that talks about this, but it's good to introduce it now. All of us have been informed that the setback from the lake was 30 meters. And Mr. Smith had a lawyer contact the Conservation Authority and the municipality where that setback was confirmed. And recently, the Conservation Authority emphasized, don't even think about extending closer to the lake than 30 meters. So we accepted that you can't build on this lot. It's not a building lot at all. If you go 30 meters back, there's no room to build a house. And all of us have made design decisions about our own properties to reflect that. Picture windows, home renovations, outdoor patios and decks have all been built on the reliance that we put on the Conservation Authority that this would not be changed. But apparently that may have been misplaced because now we have an application forward that's suggesting 21 meters. And with lots of variances, we can shoehorn a house onto this lot. That's what would happen to the view from the Pence's deck, that currently they would look out and look into the back wall of the new home. The next slide. So these are the houses I'm talking about. The Pence house in the upper left, the Moore house on the top right, the Smith house on the lower left, and Alma Villa at the bottom. So these are the jewels of Port Stanley. And what happens here, I appreciate the proposal is to do something sympathetic, which would be great. But as you see, there'll be significant impacts on the neighborhood. The next slide reiterates what I said just a moment ago. So the next slide is the application that's before you outlined that they intended setback for the buildings and structures. And when we saw intended, we understood that to mean that Kettle Creek hadn't fully reviewed this and given their approval. So it was news to me today that, in fact, they have given consent. The next slide points out that if you respect the historic setback between Alma Villa and McClary in the Smith home, you end up with about 36 square meters of building area, about the size of a two-car garage, is all that the site would afford. Hence our belief that this is not a building lot and you couldn't construct a home here. And next, so the setback has been confirmed. We've had a number of engineers, shoreline engineers. I've done some work at my house. Rick's been talking to people. Dave Russell at Alma has been talking to people, and all have confirmed that you can't build as close as proposed to the lake. Now, you can probably find an engineer that would support this, and obviously the proponent has. But we have a proposal we'd like to make, and I'll hold that for just a second. The next slide. There's a new retaining wall built on the site. The red line you see running along, that's illustrated on the plan, on the survey the proponent has provided, is the historic bottom of bank. And a new wall has been built between 3 and 5 meters into the lake. So although we're talking 21 meters, now from the new wall, the point is that lake has been captured into this lot by building out into the water. And we made inquiries, but we don't know what the status of that was with the Conservation Authority. If you use the historic bottom of bank line, you can see all the other neighbors are on that line. And this property only projects out into the water. Next is there's the wall that's just been recently rebuilt. The wall that was there was failing. And this has now been rebuilt. And the next slide shows, they're just finishing that new wall, and here are the waves coming over top of it. It is a vertical face, and when the waves hit it, the energy just goes right over top of the wall. The next slide shows, this is just sort of a calm day. On windy days or big storm days, the waves are gigantic that come over and flood that backyard and create a pond that the geese all come and swim in. The next slide shows the same. You can see the pond forming behind there. And the new wall's in the same place, the same thing is happening. The next. So here's my conclusion. This is clearly not a minor variance or significant qualitative impacts to the community. A setback from the lake has now been established, but we challenge it. And next. This is out of order, but we talked about this, so we can go to the end. There. And regarding the shoreline engineering, we, the adjacent neighbors, are willing to pay for a peer review. We understand that a report has been submitted, but we would pay, so there'd be no cost to the municipality or the Conservation Authority, to have a reputable company like Shore Plan. Milo Sturm has done tons of work all along the shoreline here. He knows this location well. And we would receive a peer review to settle this issue of setback from the water. And lastly, I'd like to thank you for the time. I've taken a little more than I deserved. And I'd like to thank many people from the neighborhood who've come out to support us as well. Any questions?
Thanks, Mr. Kotis. I'm going to start with Councillor Graham and then go to Councillor Halpin. Thank you.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. So who built that wall, that new wall that's there? Okay, and was that KCCA approved to go into the lake like that? Okay. And do you know who you spoke to at the municipality or at KCCA that originally confirmed that it was 30 meters and now we're looking at the 21 meters?
Councillor Halpin, then the Deputy Mayor, please.
Thank you, Mayor Sloan. Delaney, is it possible to go back to page 16 of Mr. Kudas' report there? Thank you. I didn't want to interrupt you there. You were kind of in a flow, but just in the interest of sort of appreciating this, if the variants were not approved, could you just sort of go up there and point out for us what the view lines would look like if they were building only within that blue space for the Pensas?
Just to interrupt, sorry, quickly. I don't think they can, Councillor Halpin. It's not large enough to build in the blue, is it? Sorry.
Yes, so as has been provided in the application, through the presentation, there was that envelope that the, I guess, neighbors had put together as what their position is on what would be a buildable envelope. So respecting the setbacks that currently exist, that blue box is what I guess, yeah, Mr. Cowdice has prepared that would be buildable based on the zoning today.
Okay, thanks. Sorry, Councillor Halpin. I was just trying to understand it too. Thank you.
Thank you. So I guess what I'm asking is if the Sharifis were to decide they wanted to build a little IKEA bachelor-sized situation, what do the view lines look like? Could you just mark it out for us? Thank you.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor, please. Thanks.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I did reach out to Kettle Creek to get some clarification on that wall that was built. And they explained to me that the walls that are along there are all basically on a 45-degree slope. And so when they measure the back set, they actually measure it from the toe of the wall in the water. So when that wall was built, it was engineered and came right off the toe and came straight up. So they didn't build out into the lake. This is how it was explained to me. They didn't build out into the lake. They went from the toe and went straight up, and it was engineered accordingly, and Kettle Creek approved that. So just for clarification on that, they didn't extend. I get where the view of it makes it look like they did extend into the lake, but all they did was come off the toe and come straight up. So I just wanted to clarify that a little bit.
I think when you look at the plan that was provided, it shows the bottom of bank where that's the toe, where the water would have been. And the wall that's built is quite far in front of that. So that's where we're getting the impression that it doesn't respect the historical toe slope. And when you look at the alignment of the bottom of all the other properties, it doesn't line up, but good.
Council? Questions? Counselor Watson, please.
Yeah, through you, Mayor. Why has nothing ever been built here before? Was there different rules before? Or is I can't understand why this sat so vacant so long. And building that wall, geez, that doesn't seem quite right to me to make it fit the parameters after the fact. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. I'm not sure if Mr. Codis wants to take this, or I think we probably should defer to Mr. McClure.
I think that would probably be a question better suited to Mr. Sharifi. The rules that are in place today are the ones that have been in place for a number of years now. I'm just not too sure. I think it's more of a question as to why the work wasn't done or an application wasn't advanced previously. So I defer to Mr. Sharifi as to why the timing now.
Would it be fair to say, if I may follow up to Counselor Watson, it would be more restrictive today due to environmental concerns than it was 25 years ago?
Again, I can't speak to 25 years ago. Since my time with the municipality, the rules have been the same. So yeah, as I said, the whether or not the studies or the desire to advance a proposal 10 years ago or more just wasn't the desire of the applicant. That would be up to them of why they would want to move forward with the development application today and not 25 years ago.
Thank you very much, Mr. McClure. I have the Deputy Mayor, then Counselor Connors.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, just for clarification too, the measurements didn't change when they redid that wall. They still measured from the toe, the 21 meters to where they're proposing to start the house. I just wanted to clarify that those measurements haven't changed. They're the same measurements from the new wall, which was where the toe of the wall was in the lake.
Yeah, that's correct. The new wall was built. They took the old wall down to the base and rebuilt it in the same location.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor. Sir, Mr. Sharifi had indicated in his presentation that he bought the property 15 years ago. Now, in my mind, and relating to what Councillor Watson said as well, I'm not going to buy a land on the water that I'm not going to develop. And I think that, from the perspective of all the neighbors, they should realize that something was probably going to be built there at some point in the future. How big or how small, no one knows. But are you opposed to any building there? Or are you opposed just to this building?
Mr. Codis.
That's a good question. I think the community had the belief that you couldn't build here at all, that there just wasn't a building lot here because of the setbacks and because of what the zoning defines. Would we be opposed to something be built here? No. But we want to make sure that what is built here conforms to the bylaws and conforms to the setback from the lake and respects the character of the neighborhood.
Thank you. Counselor Halpin, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Follow up to Councillor Connor's question. Has the community made overtures to buy this land since discovering that there was an intention to build on it or to otherwise decide what is built there?
I think there's been an ongoing discussion between Mr. Smith and Mr. Sharifi about that, but he's made it clear his intent is to build here.
Thank you. Mr. Smith, did you want to speak, sir? I see your hand up. You'll need to come to the mic because our online friends can't hear you. Thank you.
Just want to clarify the one point going back to the history. So when I acquired the property, you may recall it was under development and it was failing. So, and so what I had my lawyer do, Morris Pellin from Harrison Penza, contacted both Conservation Authority and the Central Elgin at the time before the purchase to confirm lot 16 in isolation was 90 feet, okay? Lot 17 is half at the front and half of it was in the lake. You have two separate lots. They confirmed that the one lot didn't even meet the minimum 100-foot setback because it was in isolation was too small. So the only way this could happen was to join the two lots, which we were advised by both Conservation and Central Elgin would not happen. This was coming out of GMS, which was a high yield money lender that was trying to maximize the value on that lot, and they wanted a ridiculous amount of money. So that's the only reason I did not close on those two lots was because it was basically held at ransom. And because I did the due diligence, thank you for asking the question so I can answer it. We did the due diligence. We were told by the authorities that we couldn't do this. I do this for a living as well. I trusted the word that we got back, that it was accurate. It made sense because it followed all of your planning protocols, both with Conservation and Central Elgin. And now this is trying to be manipulated into just simply making this work. What you should be doing is going back to the day before day one. We do not believe any of the required studies were done in a natural hazard area. We believe that they've been in the lake without approval or authority. We've contacted M&R and EP. We've contacted Oceans and Fisheries. We're still waiting for feedback from them. So we may have a long way to go. And relative to what Ron is saying, we would like to have Milo Strum do a shoreline peer review. We would like to go back and challenge basically everything that's been done from day one because something's off. Professionals will tell you something's off there. Thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Smith. Sorry. Yeah, please, Councillor Halpin, please go ahead.
Thank you. If I may ask a supplementary to Mr. McClure, I don't quite understand here. I thought that our property bylaws in Central Elgin said that if a person owned two properties by the same name, that they automatically became one property. Is that sort of what's going on here? Is that they've owned both and the neighbors understood that they couldn't put them together?
With respect to that, I can't speak to whether or not property has merged on title or the legalities of these parcels themselves. But however, there is a specific regulation, again, going back to the date of the Port Stanley bylaw that does provide that as long as two separate parcels are under the same ownership, that you can have buildings across property lines. I believe, again, I can't recall the exact terminology within the regulation itself, but there is something that speaks to that within the bylaw. Again, I'm not too sure about this and the status from what I'm seeing on if we go, and again, I'm not too sure if Ms. Leach could bring up the presentation again on slide either 16 or sorry 19 of the application. It looks as though there's some dotted line that I believe Mr. Smith was speaking to. That's a separate lot. None of the buildings or the building that's being proposed appears to be crossing property lines. It's simply being utilized as part of that southerly extent where I guess the potential grassed area and where the retaining wall is. And then to some of I guess your previous question about building footprint in that, if you look at the building envelope of the blue square on the screen itself, with the new information provided now by the Kettle Creek Conservation Authority and that 21-meter setback, that blue line would extend down. So the extent of the variances to the bylaw would essentially be that small perimeter area around what that blue box would be. So again, kind of putting into context of what the variance is being requested. A variance is not being requested from the southerly limit of the property line. That is dealing with the separate process with the KCCA and the regulated area and the setback from Kettle Creek. So that's separate from the minor variance being requested, other than a condition being imposed or requested by Kettle Creek to ensure that no development goes into that area as part of their regulating or permitting authority.
Thank you. Is that okay? Counselor Graham, did you have a question?
Not a question, just kind of a general comment. I think that it seems pretty warranted that with Mr. Smith, is that correct? Had contacted the municipality and KCCA and was advised of, what the setback would need to be on that piece of property. And then we're getting two different sets of information. I think that we should be having a little more clarification, whether it's from KCCA and also from the shoreline company to do a full review of that. I think it's a valid and very warranted at this point with all this conflicting information.
Thank you. Our decision tonight, Mr. McClure, though, is with respect to a minor variance, correct? And that's only the minor variance that's up.
That's correct.
Does council feel comfortable making a decision on that? Please. Absolutely.
Thank you. Just before we do make that decision, could I just ask Mr. McClure, procedurally, is it regular for a council to go back and get additional, or would it be more regular for us to go forward and give the opportunity to those who are concerned to go to the land tribunal with it? Is there a requirement for us to do it one way or the other, or is that something we could choose?
I
Please.
believe it's something that the committee can choose how they wish to decide whether or not to defer pending, more information or that. Obviously, with that comes potential, again, risk to the municipality, as the application and the applicant does have its own abilities to undertake next steps through the Planning Act as well. So.
And also with respect to next steps, if the committee declines the minor variance, then the applicant can come forward again.
The applicant could come forward again if the committee declines, or the applicant does have the right to appeal the decision as well. I guess that's the only other aspect to note, is that through the changes to the Planning Act 2 years ago, the neighboring property owners do not have a right to appeal for minor variances.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. McClure, can you speak to what Mr. Smith said, that he was told that there was not an ability to build on that? That would have come from Central Elgin Planning, maybe?
I can't speak to who they spoke to, or this Mr. Smith spoke to, or what information he got that said they couldn't build on the property. That was not from myself. So.
Thank you. I think we're going to make our decision. Is there anyone else that wishes to speak? Mr. Shreefy, anyone in the crowd that wants to come forward? Right. Mr. Shreef, do you want to come up, sir?
Sure, it's hard. I don't even know where to start because there's a lot of misleading things that we heard tonight here. And I'm very, very disappointed. I had a lot of respect for Mr. Ron. He showed us the measurement of this house. He showed us the 37 feet from the street. But he never told us how deep is his lot, what's the depth of his lot, which is exactly like the lot that I have. His backyard, it's 1.8 meters. And that's 20 years ago when it was built. His builder got a variance for 1.8 meters. And the variance was done February 2001. My side yard is 1.2, his 0.6. And these are information that I just gathered very quick. I want them to tell me, the neighborhood, to tell me which one of the homes that he was speaking on their behalf meets the setbacks better than I will. As far as the wall goes, it's nonsense what I heard. 30 meters from the lake are without seawall. When I purchased the land about 15 years ago, as soon as I purchased the land, I did the wall. I hired coastal engineering firm and I did the wall. And at the time, I was approved, which I can provide you the documents. for a house only 10 meters away from the wall. But I choose not to build for that time. Now that I wanted to build, rules changed. So I had to hire, I approached KCCA. They gave me a list of coastal engineers that are approved by KCCA, which were about probably 7, 8, 10 of them. And I picked one of that company. And we've been working with them for almost 3 years to come up to the point to get the building permit. So based on the design of the wall, it's established 21 meters setback. And Joe Gordon is confirming that in a letter. But not 30 meters. 30 meters, that's without the wall. And if I choose to spend more money, I probably could have gone to 15 meters or something. Because of the strength of the wall dictates how far you can be from that. But 21 meters is something that we all agreed. KCCA, they did peer review the application that I had from my coastal engineers. So everybody in the end, it came up to the conclusion, 21 meters, that's acceptable for everyone, and I'm accepting of that too. So that's exactly what I'm intending to do.
Thank you. Councillor Connors, do you have a question for Mr.
Yes,
Sharifi?
through you, Mayor. Frank, when you were approved to build the house previously, can I ask the first question, who approved you? And the second question is the footprint different from between then and now of the house?
Sorry, Frank, microphone, sir.
Sorry. When I purchased the property, first thing I did, I contacted municipality, as I always do, and went to KCCA. And I asked them what I need to do the wall, to protect the land. So they told me that I got to do an application and I got to have a design, coastal engineer to do the design. And if it meets the criteria, they will issue the permit. And I did get the permit that I did the wall. And everybody here knows that because Mr. Smith is talking to Joe Gordon all the time. He knows more about my property than I know. And I did the wall and I was approved for 10 meters. But I didn't build at the time because I didn't win with the minor variance and stuff because I wanted to establish the line from the lake. But because I wasn't ready to build, I let it go for all these years. Now that I want to build, things changed and I had to comply to the new rules. And this is exactly what I've done.
And the
Setbacks, the house that I'm proposing, that's an improvement to my place. Now, another thing, I don't like saying these things, but just, I've been doing this for almost 40 years. The guys that are nonstop, one approach me.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Connors, thank you, Mr. Sharifi. Councillor Connors, did you have a question to follow up?
yeah, the second part of the question was, is the footprint larger now than it was back when you were initially approved?
Microphone, sir. Just press the button.
Absolutely, because it was 10 meters compared to the 21 meters that I got approved now. So the building envelope, it's smaller now.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Nobody can build seawall without KCCA approval, especially having Rick, your neighbor, that's calling 10 times a day then, that's impossible.
Councillor Halpin.
If I may call a point of order on this, I think it would be appropriate that anyone that wants to remark on what Mr. Sharifi says should be coming to the microphone and saying it on record.
Thank you. I appreciate that and I agree. Further questions or comments? Thank you, Mr. Sharifi. Anything online? We're good, Ms. Leach?
Mr. Mayor, I have no virtual attendees.
Thank you. Everyone's been given a fair opportunity to be heard. Is the committee prepared to make a decision or reserve its decision? All those in favor? Opposed? Record the vote, please, Ms. Leach.
Counselor Graham,
No.
Counselor Halpin,
Yes.
Counselor Watson,
No.
Counselor Connors,
No.
Counselor Bach,
Yes.
Deputy Mayor No,
Yes.
Mayor Sloan.
No.
That's defeated.
Those wanting to be notified of the committee's decision on any application should email Delaney Leach indicating which public meeting they wish to be notified, provide their name and address. Those who do not have access to a computer and wish to be notified should call Delaney Leach at 631-4860. This public meeting is adjourned at 7:45. Thank you.